There was a night, and some of you will know exactly what kind of night this was, when every prayer felt like it hit the ceiling and fell back down. Every affirmation tasted like cardboard in my mouth. Every technique, every method, every carefully rehearsed mental exercise collapsed under the weight of a single, crushing truth. Nothing was working. My wife had passed 3 months earlier. The parish I had served for over a decade was asking me to step aside. My health had deteriorated to the point where climbing a flight of stairs left me breathless and trembling. And the worst part, the truly devastating part, was that I had spent my entire adult life teaching people how to use the power of the subconscious mind to transform their reality. And there I sat at 2 a.m. in a dark apartment in Los Angeles, unable to transform my own. You want to know what humility really feels like? It does not arrive when you choose it. It arrives when every last shred of your expertise, your reputation, your carefully constructed identity as someone who has the answers, when all of that gets stripped away and you are left sitting in the rubble with nothing but your own breathing. That was where I found myself. Not on a mountaintop, not in a monastery, not in some dignified moment of spiritual seeking, just a broken man in a dark room. And something happened in that darkness that changed the entire trajectory of my work, my teaching, and my understanding of what it means to be alive. The mind stopped. Not because I told it to, not because I practiced some technique. It stopped because it had nowhere left to go. Every thought I could think had been thought. Every solution I could imagine had been imagined and had failed. The mind, that brilliant, relentless, magnificent machine I had spent decades studying, simply ran out of fuel. And in that moment of exhaustion, something extraordinary became clear to me. The silence that rushed in was not an absence. It was a presence that had been there all along, drowned out by the roar of my own thinking. It had been waiting, patiently, faithfully, for the machinery to wind down so that it could finally be heard. And in the space that opened up, in that vacuum where thought used to be, something else was there, something vast, something that did not think, did not analyze, did not strategize, something that simply was. You could call it peace. But that word is too small. Peace suggests the absence of conflict. This was the presence of something, an infinite, breathing, living presence that seemed to hold me the way the ocean holds a single drop of water, not separate from it, contained within it, made of the same substance. For 20 minutes, or perhaps it was 2 hours, time had lost all meaning. I existed in that space. No thoughts, no fears, no identity. No Joseph Murphy who needed to fix anything, prove anything, or become anything. Just awareness. Pure, unbounded, luminous awareness. When the mind eventually returned, gently, almost apologetically, something fundamental had shifted. The grief was still there. The challenges were still there. But the person facing those challenges was no longer the same person who had sat down in that chair hours earlier. What happened in that dark room was not a breakdown. It was a breakthrough to something I had been circling around in my books and lectures for years without fully entering it myself. The subconscious mind, that great creative power I had written about so extensively, has a deeper layer still. A layer beneath all programming, beneath all belief, beneath all conditioning. A place I now call the void state. And what I have learned since that night, through decades of additional study, through working with thousands of individuals, through my own continued practice, is that this void state is not an accident. It is not reserved for mystics or monks. It is the birthright of every single human being who has ever drawn breath. You carry it within you right now as you sit here listening to my voice. Beneath the worry about your mortgage, beneath the argument you had this morning, beneath the diagnosis you received last week that you have not told anyone about, beneath all of it, there is a silence so vast, so creative, so magnificently powerful, that if you touched it for even 30 seconds, you would never again doubt what you are capable of. And I want you to hear me clearly on this point, that silence is not passive, that silence is the most active, most creative, most generative force in the universe. Stars are born in the silence of space. Seeds germinate in the silence of soil. Every great idea that has ever transformed civilization first appeared in the silence of a single human mind. Not during the noise, not during the busyness, but in the gap, in the stillness, in the void. You have been taught your entire life that action is power. And action has its place. Of course it does. But the deepest power, the kind that reshapes reality at its foundations, operates in silence. It operates in the space between thought. It operates in the territory that your conscious mind dismisses as emptiness, but that is in truth the fullest, richest, most magnificent dimension of your own being. That is what we are going to explore together. Not as theory, not as philosophy, as lived, breathing, practical reality. Because the void state is not something you achieve. It is something you allow. And by the time we are finished here, you will know exactly how to allow it. What the void actually is, most people hear the word void and they recoil. They picture emptiness, nothingness, some kind of cosmic black hole where you lose yourself and never come back. And I understand that reaction completely, because for the first 40 years of my life, I probably would have had the same one. But here is what I need you to understand. And this is perhaps the most important distinction I will make in everything we discuss here. The void is not empty. The void is full. It is so full, so saturated with potential, that it appears empty to the conscious mind because the conscious mind has no framework for what it is witnessing. Think of it this way. When you look at the night sky, you see blackness between the stars. Your eyes tell you there is nothing there. But physics tells you that so-called empty space is seething with energy. Quantum fluctuations, virtual particles appearing and disappearing billions of times per second. Fields of force that hold the entire universe together. The blackness is not absence. The blackness is the canvas upon which everything that exists is painted. That is what your unconscious mind is. It is the canvas. The conscious mind, with all its cleverness, all its planning, all its worrying, is the paint. And we have spent our entire lives fixated on the paint, while ignoring the canvas that makes the paint possible. Now, let me be very precise about what I mean when I say the void state. This is not meditation, although meditation can lead you toward it. This is not hypnosis, although hypnosis works with the same deeper layers of mind. This is not sleep, although the doorway to the void state often opens in that drowsy corridor between waking and sleeping. The void state is a specific condition of consciousness in which the activity of the conscious mind drops to near zero. And rather than falling asleep, you remain aware. Aware without thought, present without analysis, alive without the constant narration that normally accompanies every waking moment. You have actually been there before, every single one of you. You simply did not recognize it because no one ever told you what it was. Remember a moment when you were so absorbed in watching a sunset that time stopped. Remember a moment when you held a newborn baby and the entire world went quiet. Remember a moment of such profound awe, standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon perhaps, or hearing a piece of music that seemed to reach inside your chest. That for just a few seconds, the voice in your head went completely silent. That was the threshold. That was the doorway cracking open. Most of us only touch it for a moment before the mind rushes back in with commentary. Wow, that was beautiful. I should take a photo. I wonder what we are having for dinner. But what if you could stay there? What if, instead of the mind pulling you back after 3 seconds, you could remain in that space for 3 minutes, or 30 minutes, or an entire hour? This is not fantasy. This is what the great traditions of every civilization on earth have been pointing toward for thousands of years. The Hindus called it Turiya, the fourth state of consciousness beyond waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. The Christian mystics called it contemplative prayer, or the dark night of the soul, not as punishment, but as passage. The Sufis called it fana, the dissolution of the false self into the real. They were all describing the same place. They were all entering the same door. And what they found on the other side was not nothing. They found everything. Because here is the law, and I call it a law deliberately because it operates with the same reliability as gravity. The unconscious mind creates most powerfully from stillness, not from effort, not from repetition, not from gritting your teeth and trying harder, from stillness. When the conscious mind stops generating noise, the unconscious mind, which is always listening, always receiving, always creating, can finally hear clearly. It can hear the desire you planted. It can feel the image you impressed upon it. And without interference from doubt, worry, analysis, or contradiction, it goes to work with an efficiency and a power that the conscious mind cannot even comprehend. Every genuine miracle I have witnessed in over 50 years of this work, and I have witnessed many, occurred not when someone tried harder, but when someone finally stopped trying and allowed the deeper intelligence to take over. That allowing, that releasing, that beautiful, terrifying act of surrender, that is the doorway to the void state. And here is something else I want you to consider. Every night, when you fall asleep, you pass through the void without knowing it. There is a moment, and if you have ever caught yourself falling asleep, you know exactly the moment I mean, where you are no longer awake but not yet dreaming. A moment of pure, formless awareness. No images, no thoughts, no sense of self, just consciousness, naked and unadorned. You pass through that moment every single night of your life. You have been doing it since the day you were born. And each time, that brief passage through the void restores your body, reorganizes your mind, and returns you to waking life refreshed in ways that no amount of conscious effort could accomplish. What I am proposing is not that you learn something new. I am proposing that you learn to stay awake during a process that has been healing you every night for your entire existence. The void is not a stranger. It is your oldest, most intimate companion. You have simply been asleep each time it embraced you. The fear that guards the gate now. Let me address something directly, because if I do not, everything else I say will be filtered through it. There is a reason most people never enter the void state, and it is not because they lack discipline or knowledge or spiritual maturity. It is because the moment they approach it, they become afraid. And the fear is not irrational. The fear makes perfect sense when you understand what is being asked of you. What is being asked of you at the threshold of the void is the temporary death of who you think you are. Not your body, not your soul, your identity. The story you have been telling yourself since childhood about who you are, what you are worth, and what is possible for you. Let me tell you about a woman who came to see me years ago in New York. Her name was Margaret. She was 52 years old, a school teacher, and she had been suffering from chronic pain in her lower back for 11 years. She had seen every specialist. She had tried every treatment. Nothing worked. When Margaret first came to my lectures, she was enthusiastic. She practiced the affirmations. She did the visualizations before sleep. She made modest progress. The pain would lessen for a few days, then return with a vengeance. This went on for months. One afternoon, she sat in my office and said something that stopped me cold. She said, "Dr. Murphy, I think the pain is me. I do not know who I would be without it." Do you hear what she was saying? She was not being dramatic. She was being profoundly honest. For 11 years, her entire life had organized itself around that pain. Her relationships, her daily routines, her conversations, her identity, all of it revolved around being a person with chronic pain. To release the pain would be to step into a void, and the void was more terrifying than the pain. This is the mechanism. This is why people stay stuck in jobs they hate, relationships that diminish them, habits that are slowly destroying them. The familiar suffering has become their identity. And to release it, to truly let it go, requires them to stand in the open space where the suffering used to be and face the most terrifying question a human being can face. If I am not this, then what am I? The ego, that constructed self, that magnificent survival mechanism, will do anything to avoid that question. It will create distractions. It will generate anxiety. It will convince you that now is not the right time, that you need to read one more book, take one more course, that you are not ready. You are ready. You have always been ready. The ego simply does not want you to know that. Here is what I told Margaret, and I will tell you the same thing. The void you are afraid of is not destruction. It is renovation. When a caterpillar enters the chrysalis, it does not simply grow wings. Its entire body dissolves. Every cell breaks down into a kind of biological soup. And from that soup, from that apparent chaos, that apparent death, an entirely new creature assembles itself. The caterpillar does not decide which cells become wings and which become antennae. Something deeper than the caterpillar's conscious awareness orchestrates the entire transformation. And the only thing required of the caterpillar is that it stop crawling and allow the process to happen. You are being asked to do the same thing. Not to figure out your transformation, not to plan it or strategize it or effort your way through it, just to stop crawling for long enough to let the deeper intelligence take over. Margaret eventually did, not because she found courage. She would tell you she never felt courageous at all. She did it because she got tired. Tired enough to surrender. Tired enough to say, whatever I am beyond this pain, let it come, even if it is nothing, even if I disappear, because this existence is not worth protecting. Within 3 weeks of that surrender, the pain that had persisted for 11 years was gone. Not reduced. Gone. And what replaced it was not emptiness. What replaced it was a woman she had not been since she was a young girl. Creative, playful, energetic, free. The fear that guards the gate is real. But what it guards is not danger. It guards your freedom. And it only has power as long as you believe it. Every great transformation in human history, personal, collective, spiritual, has required someone to walk through a door they could not see the other side of. That is what the void asks. Not that you be brave, just that you be willing. And let me add something here that I think is critical. The fear does not go away. You do not wake up one morning and feel ready. Readiness is not a feeling. It is a decision. Every person who has ever entered the void and come back transformed will tell you the same thing. They were afraid when they went in. The courage is not in the absence of fear. The courage is in the willingness to move forward while the fear is screaming at you to stop. Margaret was afraid. The mystics were afraid. I was afraid, sitting in that dark room after my wife passed. Fear is the admission price. You pay it. You walk through the gate, and on the other side you discover that the fear was a guardian, not a warden. It was testing your sincerity. And once you pass the test, it steps aside and becomes your ally rather than your obstacle. Letting go of the mind you think you need here is a question I want you to sit with for a moment, and I mean really sit with it, not just intellectually process it and move on. The question is this: what if the mind that got you here is the very thing that is keeping you from getting there? We worship the intellect. And I say this as someone who has spent a lifetime studying, writing, and teaching. Nobody loves the mind more than I do. The conscious mind is a magnificent tool. It can analyze, categorize, plan, and create with astonishing precision. Without it, civilization would not exist. But a tool is only useful when it is being used for its proper purpose. A hammer is brilliant for driving nails. It is catastrophic for performing surgery. And the conscious mind, for all its brilliance, is catastrophic at the one thing most people are trying to use it for: creating lasting inner transformation. You cannot think your way to peace. You cannot analyze your way to healing. You cannot strategize your way to the kind of deep cellular change that transforms a life from the inside out. These things happen in a realm that the conscious mind not only cannot reach, it cannot even perceive. Let me share something that took me decades to fully grasp. When I was a young man studying in India, I spent time with a teacher whose name I will keep private out of respect for his wishes. He was not famous. He had no books, no followers, no organization. He lived in 2 rooms above a shop in a small town, and the only reason I found him was through a chain of introductions that felt, in retrospect, orchestrated by something far wiser than my conscious plan. This man could do things that defied every framework I had for understanding reality. Not parlor tricks. I am not talking about bending spoons. He could look at a person he had never met and describe their childhood. He could place his hands on someone and their fever would break within minutes. He could sit in silence and the entire room would fill with a quality of peace so dense it was almost physical, like being submerged in warm water. One afternoon, after watching him work with a woman who had been unable to conceive for 7 years, she became pregnant within the month. I asked him how he did it, how he accessed this power, how he knew what to do. His answer dismantled everything I thought I knew. He looked at me with complete simplicity and said, "I do not do anything. I stop doing. When there is no one here doing, the power that made the body heals the body. My job is to get out of the way. Get out of the way." 4 decades of subsequent experience have taught me that those 5 words contain the entire secret of the void state. I did not understand him immediately. It took years for the full weight of what he said to penetrate my conditioning. Because everything in our culture, everything in our education, our upbringing, our professional training tells us the opposite. It tells us that results come from effort, that progress comes from doing more, trying harder, pushing further. And in the material world, that is often true. But in the world of the deeper mind, the inner world where real transformation occurs, the opposite law prevails. The less you interfere, the more powerfully the deeper intelligence operates. The conscious mind is doing, the unconscious mind is being. The conscious mind grasps. The unconscious mind receives. The conscious mind tries. The unconscious mind allows. And the power, The creative, healing, transforming power that you are seeking resides not in the doing, but in the being. This is why your affirmations sometimes fail. This is why your visualizations sometimes produce no result. Not because the techniques are wrong. The techniques are sound. But if you are performing them from a state of desperate effort, if underneath the affirmation there is a clenched fist of "please let this work," then the conscious mind is overriding the very message you are trying to send. The subconscious mind does not respond to what you say. It responds to what you are. And if what you are, in the moment of your practice, is a knot of anxiety trying to force a result, then that knot of anxiety is exactly what gets impressed upon the deeper mind. This is not a problem. This is a doorway. Because once you understand this mechanism, you stop trying to perfect your technique and you start working on something far more fundamental: your state. Not your affirmation, your state. Not your visualization, your state. Not the words you use or the images you hold, the quality of consciousness from which you use them. And the highest state, the most receptive, most creative, most powerful state available to a human being is the void state, the state of emptied awareness. The state where the conscious mind has been lovingly, gently, deliberately set aside, not destroyed, not suppressed, simply set aside the way you set aside a tool when you are finished using it, and the vast, infinite, creative unconscious is allowed to operate without interference. When you reach that state, you do not need better affirmations. You do not need more willpower. You do not need another book or another teacher. The unconscious mind, unobstructed, will move toward wholeness the way water moves downhill, naturally, inevitably, and with irresistible force. The architecture of the unconscious, before you can enter a building with confidence, it helps to understand how it is built. So let me take you into the architecture of the deeper mind, not as dry psychology, but as a living map of the territory you are about to explore. Think of your total mind as having three distinct layers. The first layer is the conscious mind, the part that is listening to my words right now, analyzing them, agreeing or disagreeing, cross-referencing what I say with what you already believe. This layer is important. It is your navigator, your editor, your quality control. But it represents perhaps 5% of your total mental activity. 5%. The second layer is what I call the personal unconscious. This is the vast storehouse of every experience you have ever had, every emotion you have ever felt, every belief you have ever accepted, whether you remember accepting it or not. Your childhood is here. Your traumas are here. Your triumphs are here. Every word your mother ever said to you, every look your father ever gave you, every experience in every classroom and playground and workplace of your life, it is all recorded here with perfect fidelity. This is the layer that most of my work has focused on. When I talk about impressing an idea on the subconscious mind, I am usually talking about this layer, and it is enormously powerful. The beliefs stored here literally shape your body, your health, your relationships, your financial reality. Change the programming in the personal unconscious, and you change the outer life. This is real and it works. But there is a third layer, and this third layer is what makes the void state so profoundly different from ordinary subconscious programming. Beneath the personal unconscious, deeper than your individual history, deeper than your personal beliefs, deeper than anything that is uniquely yours, there is a stratum of mind that connects you to something universal. Call it the collective unconscious, as Jung did. Call it the infinite intelligence, as I often do. Call it God. Call it the divine matrix. Call it the quantum field. The name does not matter. What matters is its nature. This deepest layer does not contain your memories. It contains the creative power that generated the universe itself. It does not store belief. It is the source from which all belief arises. It is not programmed. It is the programmer. And the void state is the condition of consciousness in which this deepest layer becomes directly accessible, not through the filter of your personal history, not through the distortion of your individual beliefs, directly, nakedly, without mediation. When you enter the void state, you temporarily bypass the personal unconscious, with all its limitations, all its scars, all its conditioned responses, and you make contact with a power that has no limitations, no scars, and no condition. This is why the mystics throughout history have reported experiences of infinite love, infinite knowledge, and infinite creative power. They were not hallucinating. They were perceiving accurately. They had simply dropped below the level of personal conditioning into the universal substratum where those qualities are the native atmosphere. Now, let me make this practical, because I am not interested in giving you a beautiful theory that you cannot use. The practical implication of this architecture is extraordinary, and it is this. When you enter the void state and impress an intention upon that deepest layer of mind, you are not working with the limited resources of your personal history. You are working with the unlimited resources of the creative intelligence itself. A person who tries to heal using only the personal unconscious is limited by what they believe is possible. But a person who enters the void state and touches the universal layer, that person is no longer constrained by personal belief, because they have accessed a level of mind that exists prior to belief. This is why some healings seem to violate everything we know about biology. This is why some manifestations seem to violate everything we know about probability. The person did not override natural law. They accessed a deeper natural law, one that operates from a level of reality where the ordinary rules of limitation simply do not apply. You do not have to convince the unconscious mind to heal you. You only have to stop convincing it not to. And this leads to something I consider one of the most liberating realizations available to any human being. You have been working too hard. Not in your job, that is a separate matter. In your inner life, you have been working too hard. You have been straining to create what the deeper mind would create effortlessly if you simply stopped interfering. Think about your own body for a moment. Right now, without any instruction from your conscious mind, your heart is pumping blood through 60,000 miles of blood vessels. Your digestive system is breaking down food into molecular components and distributing nutrients to trillions of cells. Your immune system is identifying and neutralizing threats you will never be consciously aware of. All of this is happening in perfect coordination, with staggering complexity, without a single conscious thought from you. Who is doing that? What intelligence is orchestrating that magnificent symphony of biological activity? It is the same intelligence you access in the void state. It is the same power. And if it can manage the incomprehensible complexity of keeping you alive, effortlessly, silently, without being asked, what makes you think it cannot handle your financial problems? What makes you think it cannot heal your relationships? What makes you think it cannot guide you to the work you were born to do? It can. It will. It is waiting to. The only thing standing between you and that power is the noise of a conscious mind that has convinced itself it must do everything alone. That is the architecture. The conscious mind thinks. The personal unconscious stores. The universal unconscious creates. And the void state is the elevator that takes you from the penthouse of thinking down into the basement of creation, where the real power lives. Entering the void. The practice. So now we arrive at the question you have been waiting for. How? How do you actually do this? How do you enter the void state deliberately, reliably, and safely? Let me begin by saying what the practice is not. It is not forcing your mind to be blank. Anyone who has ever tried to force their mind to stop thinking knows that it is like trying to smooth water with a flat iron. The effort creates more turbulence, not less. The conscious mind cannot be beaten into submission. It can only be gently invited to rest. The practice also is not escapism. You are not trying to leave your body, leave this world, or dissociate from reality. You are trying to go deeper into reality, past the surface chatter, and into the bedrock. Here is what I teach, and I want you to understand that this method has been refined through decades of work with ordinary people, not monks, not meditators with 20 years of practice, but school teachers and accountants and truck drivers and mothers of 4 who have 10 minutes before the house wakes up. First, the body. You must begin with the body because the body is the anchor that keeps you from falling asleep as the mind quiets down. Lie down or sit in a comfortable chair. Close your eyes. And then, starting from your feet and moving slowly upward, deliberately relax every muscle group in your body. Not by force, by attention. Simply bring your awareness to your feet and notice whatever tension is there. Do not try to release it. Just notice it. Observe it the way you might observe a bird sitting on a fence, with gentle, detached curiosity. And what you will discover, what thousands of my students have discovered, is that tension cannot survive attention. When you look at it directly, without judgment, without trying to fix it, it releases on its own. Move from your feet to your calves, from your calves to your thighs, your hips, your belly, your chest, your shoulders. Spend extra time here because your shoulders carry the weight of your worries, and they are usually the last to let go. Your arms, your hands, your neck, your jaw, your face. By the time you reach the top of your head, your body should feel heavy, warm, and deeply relaxed. Some people describe it as sinking into the chair. Others say it feels like the body is dissolving at the edges. Both descriptions point to the same thing. The body is no longer sending distress signals to the mind, and without those signals, the mind begins to quiet naturally. Second, the breath. Once the body is settled, bring your awareness to your breathing. Do not control it. Do not make it deeper or slower or more rhythmic. Simply watch it. Become a witness to your own breathing. This is a subtle but revolutionary shift. Normally you breathe unconsciously. The body does it for you. When you practice breathing exercises, you breathe consciously. You take control. But in this practice, you do neither. You observe the breathing as if it belongs to someone else. You watch the air enter. You watch the air leave. You have no opinion about it. You are simply present to it. This observation of the breath is the bridge between the waking state and the void state. Each breath you observe without interfering with carries you a little deeper, a little further from the surface, a little closer to the silence. Third, the release. As you observe the breath, thoughts will come. They will always come. This is not failure. This is the mind doing what the mind does. But here is the crucial instruction. When a thought arrives, do not engage with it. Do not argue with it. Do not follow it. Do not judge yourself for having it. Simply let it pass. Imagine your thoughts are clouds moving across a wide sky. The sky does not chase the clouds. The sky does not resist the clouds. The sky simply remains. You are the sky. At some point, and I cannot tell you exactly when, because it is different for everyone, the gaps between thoughts will begin to widen. Where there was a constant stream of mental commentary, there will now be moments of silence, brief at first, a second or two, then 5 seconds, then 10. In those gaps, you are touching the void state, not fully immersed yet, but touching it. And even those brief touches carry enormous power, because in those moments of pure awareness without thought, the deepest layers of the unconscious mind are fully exposed, fully receptive, and fully creative. Fourth, the descent. If you simply remain present, observing without engaging, allowing without controlling, the gaps will eventually merge. The silence will become continuous. Thought will still be available to you. You have not lost the ability to think, but it will be in the background, the way a distant radio playing in another room is technically audible but no longer commanding your attention. This is the void state, and when you are in it, you will know it. Not because fireworks go off, not because you see visions or hear voices. You will know it because of the quality of the silence. It is not an empty silence. It is a pregnant silence, a silence that hums with possibility, a silence that feels paradoxically more real than anything you experience with your eyes open. In this state, if there is something you wish to create, a healing, a change in circumstance, a quality you wish to embody, you do not need to repeat an affirmation 100 times. You simply hold the idea. One single, clear, feeling-infused idea. Not as words, as knowing. The way you know your own name, without effort, without doubt, as fact. The unconscious mind in the void state receives that knowing like fertile soil receives a seed. And what it does with that seed requires no further effort from you. Your only job is to plant it and then leave the garden alone. What happens when you arrive describing the void state to someone who has not been there is a bit like describing the ocean to someone who has only ever seen a glass of water. The basic substance is the same, but the scale is incomprehensible until you are standing in the surf. But let me try, because knowing what to expect can be the difference between someone who stays in the void long enough to receive its gifts and someone who panics and pulls themselves out. The first thing you will notice is a kind of spaciousness. The borders of your identity, the ones that normally tell you where you end and the world begins, become porous. You do not lose yourself. You expand. It is as if you have been living your entire life in a single room and suddenly the walls dissolve and you realize the room was always sitting in the middle of an endless meadow. Some people weep when this happens, not from sadness, from relief. Because in that moment, every limitation they have ever believed about themselves is revealed to be an opinion, not a fact. And the weight of carrying those opinions for 30, 40, 50 years lifts in an instant. The second thing you notice is what I can only call an intelligence. Not your intelligence, not the intellect that solves crossword puzzles and balances checkbooks. A vaster intelligence. An intelligence that seems to know things you do not know, see things you cannot see, and hold a perspective so comprehensive that your personal problems, which felt so enormous 10 minutes ago, suddenly look like ripples on an infinite ocean. When I was in that dark room after my wife's passing, the shift I described was precisely this. The grief did not disappear, but I suddenly perceived it from a perspective so much larger than my own that its power over me fundamentally changed. It was as if I had been staring at a single pixel on a screen, convinced it was the whole picture, and then the camera pulled back and I saw the entire image for the first time. The third thing, and this is where it becomes intensely practical, is receptivity. In the void state, the unconscious mind is in a condition of absolute receptivity. Whatever you bring into that space, an image, a feeling, a conviction, is received without resistance, without analysis, without the conscious mind's habitual interference. This is why the void state is so dramatically more effective than ordinary affirmation or visualization. When you affirm something in your normal waking state, the conscious mind is running interference. You say, "I am healthy," and a voice in the back of your head whispers, "But the doctor said." You visualize abundance, and a feeling in your gut says, "Who are you kidding?" These contradictions dilute the impression. They are like trying to write a message in sand while the waves keep washing it away. But in the void state, the waves have stopped. The sand is perfectly smooth, and every mark you make upon it is permanent. There was a man, a retired engineer from Detroit named Harold, who attended one of my seminars in the early 1960s. Harold had been diagnosed with what his doctors described as an incurable condition affecting his eyesight. He was slowly going blind, and the medical establishment had told him there was nothing to be done. Harold was not a spiritual man. He was not a religious man. He was a practical, logical, no-nonsense engineer who had never meditated a day in his life and would have laughed at the suggestion 6 months early. But he was also desperate, and desperation, as I have seen many times, can be a powerful ally because it strips away the pretense and leaves you willing to try what you would never normally consider. Harold practiced the method I taught him. Every evening he would lie down, relax his body, quiet his mind, and descend into the silence. And in that silence, he held one simple image: himself reading the newspaper clearly, without glasses, in bright morning light. Within 8 weeks, his ophthalmologist documented a reversal that he called, and I quote the spirit of his words, medically inexplicable. Harold's vision had improved by 40%. Within 6 months, he was reading that newspaper exactly as he had imagined. Now, I share this story not to promise you that every condition can be reversed. I am not in the business of false promises. I share it to illustrate a principle. The unconscious mind, when accessed at its deepest level, when freed from the contradictions and limitations of conscious interference, possesses a creative and restorative power that operates beyond what the conscious mind believes is possible. You do not need to believe it is possible. Harold certainly did not when he started. You only need to enter the state and let the deeper intelligence do its work. Something else happens in the void state that I want to mention because it surprises many people. You begin to receive what I can only call knowings, not thoughts, not ideas that you construct through logic. Spontaneous, fully formed understandings that arrive complete. The way a gift arrives on your doorstep, you did not order it, you did not assemble it, but there it is. These knowings might be solutions to problems you have been wrestling with for months. They might be creative insights for your work. They might be deep recognitions about relationships or life choices that cut through confusion like a blade through fog. They arrive because in the void state, you are no longer limited to the information contained in your personal conscious mind. You have access to the universal reservoir. And the universal reservoir has answers you have never considered because your conscious mind was too narrow to even formulate the question. Some of the most important decisions of my life were not made through analysis. They were received in the silence. The decision to write my first book. The decision to move to Los Angeles. The decision, after my wife's passing, to continue teaching rather than retreating into private grief. None of these came from weighing pros and cons on a sheet of paper. They arrived as knowings, complete, certain, and accompanied by a peace that told me they were coming from a place deeper than my own opinions. You have this same capacity, not because you are special, although you are, but because you are human. And being human means you carry within you a connection to the same infinite intelligence that designed the spiral of a nautilus shell, the orbit of the planets, and the double helix of your own DNA. The void state is simply the condition in which that connection becomes conscious. The miracles that follow surrender. The word miracle makes some people uncomfortable. They hear it and they think of fairy tales, of religious extravagance, of things that cannot be explained and therefore cannot be trusted. But let me offer you a different definition, one that I have arrived at through decades of observation. A miracle is what happens when the deeper mind is allowed to operate without interference from the surface mind. That is all, not a suspension of natural law. An expression of a deeper natural law that most people never access because they never get quiet enough to allow it. Let me tell you about several people whose lives were transformed not through heroic effort, but through the act of surrender into the void state. There was a woman in San Francisco, I will call her Ruth, who came to one of my public lectures in 1958. Ruth was 44 years old and had been estranged from her adult son for nearly a decade. The details of the estrangement are not important. What is important is the depth of her pain. She described it as a hole in the center of her chest that never closed. Ruth had tried everything the conscious mind could devise. She had written letters that were returned unopened. She had called and been hung up on. She had asked mutual friends to intervene. She had analyzed the situation from every angle, assigned blame, retracted blame, and analyzed again. Nothing had moved. When Ruth began practicing the void state, she did not try to fix the situation with her son. That is a crucial distinction. She did not enter the silence and visualize a reconciliation. She did not affirm that her son would call. She simply entered the silence. She surrendered. She let go of the need to control the outcome, and she rested in the infinite quiet of her own deeper nature. 3 weeks later, her son called her, out of nowhere, with no apparent trigger. He said he had been sitting at his kitchen table and was suddenly overwhelmed by a feeling, not a thought, a feeling that he needed to call his mother, that he had been wrong, that life was too short. Now the rational mind wants an explanation. The rational mind wants cause and effect, mechanism, something it can put in a box. And I do not pretend to fully understand the mechanism by which Ruth's inner surrender produced an outer change in a person miles away who had no conscious knowledge that she was doing anything different at all. What I can tell you is that this is not an isolated case. This pattern, inner surrender producing outer transformation in circumstances and people beyond the individual's direct control, is something I have witnessed hundreds of times. And each time, the person involved did not make it happen. They allowed it to happen by getting out of the way. There was another individual, a businessman I worked with in the 1970s. He had been on the verge of bankruptcy for 2 years. Every business deal he pursued collapsed. Every loan was denied. Every partnership fell apart. He was a man who had built a successful company through sheer force of will. And now that same force of will was getting him nowhere. When he began entering the void state regularly, the first thing that changed was not his finances. It was his desperation. The frantic, grasping energy that had been driving every decision for 2 years simply dissolved. He described it as a feeling of being held, as if the universe itself had placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You can stop fighting now." Within 2 months of that shift, a business opportunity appeared that he could not have predicted or planned. An old college acquaintance reached out to him, someone he had not spoken to in 20 years, with a proposal that not only saved his company, but expanded it beyond anything he had imagined during his most ambitious planning session. He did not manifest that opportunity through visualization or affirmation. He created the conditions for it to appear by removing the inner obstruction, the panic, the desperation, the frantic doing that had been blocking it. This is what I mean by the miracles that follow surrender. They are not rewards. They are natural consequences. When you stop damming the river with your fear and effort, the water flows where it was always trying to go. And here is something that will sound paradoxical, but is absolutely true. The less you try to control the specifics of how your good arrives, the more spectacular the form it takes. Because the conscious mind, with its limited perspective, can only imagine solutions from within its own narrow experience. But the universal unconscious has access to every possibility, every connection, every synchronicity across the entire fabric of reality. And when you surrender the how and simply hold the what, or better yet, the feeling of the what, the unconscious mind assembles pathways that the conscious mind could never have conceived. Your job is not to be the architect of your deliverance. Your job is to enter the void state, impress the feeling of your fulfilled desire upon the infinite receptivity of the deeper mind, and then get out of the way. The universe is not stingy. The unconscious mind is not reluctant. Creation is not difficult for the power that creates galaxies. The only difficulty is on your end, in the noise, the doubt, the grasping, and the interference of a conscious mind that has been trained since birth to believe that if it is not doing something, nothing is happening. The void state teaches you the opposite. When you stop doing, everything happens. And I do not say this lightly. I say it as a man who spent the first half of his career teaching people how to use their minds actively, how to affirm, how to visualize, how to impress ideas through repetition and faith. Those methods work. They have always worked. But the void state takes you beyond method altogether. It takes you to the place where method is no longer necessary because you are operating from the source itself. You are no longer sending messages to the unconscious mind. You are resting within it. And from that place of rest, creation happens not as a technique, but as a natural extension of who you are, living from the void. Now, I want to take everything we have discussed and bring it out of the practice session and into the streets, into the office, into the kitchen, into every ordinary moment of your day. Because the void state is not meant to be a 30-minute retreat from real life. It is meant to be the ground from which real life is lived. Most people practice their way into stillness, receive some benefit, and then immediately resume the frantic pace that created their problems in the first place. They treat the void state like a gas station. Pull in, fill up, pull out, burn through the fuel, and wonder why they keep running on empty. But what if you did not have to leave? What if the quiet depth you touch in practice could become the baseline from which you operate every waking hour? This is not fantasy. This is what the great teachers throughout history actually achieved. Not a life of constant meditation. They were active, engaged, passionate, sometimes feared. But underneath the activity, underneath the engagement, there was a continuous awareness of the deeper stillness. They acted from the void rather than retreating to it. And the practical results of living this way are staggering. When you operate from the surface mind alone, you are reactive. Someone cuts you off in traffic and anger surges through your body before you have a chance to choose a response. Your boss criticizes your work, and shame floods your nervous system before your rational mind can evaluate whether the criticism has merit. You read a news headline, and anxiety grips your chest before you have finished the sentence. This is the life of the surface mind. Stimulus, reaction, stimulus, reaction. An endless loop of being pushed around by circumstances, controlled by whatever happens to be in front of you at any given moment. But when you live from the void, when the deeper stillness is not something you visit, but something you inhabit, a remarkable thing happens. A space opens up between stimulus and response. Not a large space, perhaps half a second. But in that half second, you are free. Free to choose your response rather than having it chosen for you by your conditioning. This is what true freedom actually looks like. Not the absence of challenges, the presence of choice in the face of challenges. Let me tell you how to cultivate this, because it is a cultivation, a gradual deepening, rather than an overnight transformation. Begin with the morning. Before you reach for your phone, before you check the news, before you begin the daily cascade of doing, lie still for 5 minutes and reconnect with the silence. You do not need a full void state practice here. You simply need to remember, to touch the stillness briefly and carry the memory of it into your first action. Then, throughout the day, practice what I call the micro return. This takes 3 seconds. In the middle of a conversation, in the middle of a task, in the middle of a commute, drop your awareness from your head to your chest. Feel the aliveness in your body. Notice the breath. For 3 seconds, be here rather than in the story your mind is telling you about here. Those 3 seconds are a thread connecting you back to the void. And like any thread, the more often you pull it, the stronger it becomes. Over time, and I am speaking from both my own experience and from observing thousands of students, the micro returns begin to merge. The moments of awareness become longer. The gaps between them become shorter. And gradually, almost without your noticing, the stillness that you used to access only in deep practice begins to permeate your waking life. You will notice it first in small ways. A situation that would have triggered anxiety no longer does. A conversation that would have left you drained leaves you energized instead. A decision that would have agonized you for weeks arrives clearly and without struggle. Then you will notice it in larger ways. Your work becomes more creative, not because you are trying harder, but because you are interfering less with the natural flow of inspiration from the deeper mind. Your relationships become more genuine because you are no longer reacting from old patterns, but responding from present awareness. Your health improves because the body, freed from the constant stress hormones generated by an overactive surface mind, finally has the resources to repair and regenerate as it was designed to. People will notice the change before you do. They will say, "You look different, calmer, more present." They will feel more comfortable around you, although they may not be able to articulate why. What they are sensing is the depth. When a person lives from the surface, everyone around them can feel the turbulence. When a person lives from the void, everyone around them can feel the peace. You become, without trying, a stabilizing presence in every room you enter. This is what it means to live from the void. Not to escape the world, but to engage the world from a place of infinite depth rather than infinite distraction. Not to stop thinking, but to stop being enslaved by thinking. Not to abandon the conscious mind, but to root it in something deeper, vaster, and infinitely more powerful. You were not designed to live on the surface. A tree does not grow tall by spreading its branches. It grows tall by deepening its roots. And the void state is not a destination you arrive at once and then move on. It is the root system of your entire existence. The deeper it goes, the higher you can reach. Every morning you return to the silence, the roots go deeper. Every micro return throughout the day waters them. And the life that grows from those roots, the creativity, the health, the abundance, the peace, the relationships, the contribution, that life is not something you manufacture through effort. It is something that blooms naturally and inevitably from the infinite potential of the unconscious mind expressing itself through you. You are the expression. The void is the source. And when the expression stays connected to its source, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that it cannot become. You were never separate from it. Something needs to be said now, and it is the simplest thing I know and the hardest thing to accept. You have not been listening to a man describe something far away. You have not been receiving instructions for reaching a place you have never been. Everything Every word, every principle, every practice I have shared has been describing what you already are. The void state is not a foreign country. It is your home address. The infinite potential of the unconscious mind is not a power you need to acquire. It is the power that is beating your heart right now, digesting your food right now, regenerating your cells right now, keeping every atom of your body in its precise arrangement right now, all without a single conscious thought from you. You have been soaking in it your entire life the way a fish soaks in water, so completely immersed that you forgot it was there. All those years of striving, all those years of seeking, all those years of believing that peace and power and wholeness existed somewhere outside of you, in the right technique, the right teacher, the right book, the right circumstances. They were beautiful and they were necessary because they brought you here, to this moment, to this understanding. But the journey was always inward, and the destination was always already present. When you enter the void state, you are not going somewhere. You are coming home. You are returning to the condition of awareness that existed before your first thought, before your first belief, before the world told you who you were and what you could not do. That awareness has never left you. It has never been damaged. It has never been diminished by your failures or enhanced by your successes. It is the same awareness that watched your first breath and will watch your last. It is the one thing about you that has never changed and never will. So do not leave this conversation thinking you need to become something. You need to unbecome. Layer by layer, belief by belief, fear by fear, gently, lovingly, at your own pace, let fall away everything that is not the silence. What remains when everything else falls away? You do. The real you. The you that was there before the world got its hands on you. The you that does not need to be fixed because it was never broken. The you that is not seeking power because it is power. Pure, infinite, creative power, resting quietly in the void, waiting for you to stop searching long enough to notice that it was within you all along. And here is my final thought, the one I want you to carry with you when you leave this room and step back into the noise of your daily life. You do not have to hold onto anything I have said. You do not have to remember every technique, every story, every principle, because the truth is simpler than all of that. The void remembers you even when you forget it. The deeper mind is working on your behalf even when you are too busy to acknowledge it. The infinite potential of your unconscious nature does not depend on your conscious cooperation. It only accelerates when you offer it. So be gentle with yourself. Be patient with the process. And on those days when the noise is loud and the stillness feels impossibly far away, remember this: the silence is never more than one breath away. One breath. That is all that separates you from the infinite. Close your eyes for a moment, wherever you are. Take one breath. Feel the silence underneath the noise. It is there. It has always been there. And it will be there long after every noise in your life has faded away. That silence is not nothing. That silence is everything. And it is yours.